Hello, Haunted Hearts Society members. Welcome back to the Haunted Hearts Society Dark Literature Podcast. Woo! Fanfare! Today we are talking about this short story called Ovando by Jamaica Kincaid. Make sure to like the video, subscribe on YouTube, follow us on Instagram, Tumblr, Substack. Did I miss any?
TikTok,
the Tiki-Taki. And you can also follow us and or subscribe if you're on a different platform listening to us. Because I know they all have different vocabulary, which is frustrating.
Presumably, if you have a podcast platform of choice, you know how it works.
Yes, that's true. Well, follow us. We
Join
do this
us.
thing. That's right. Join us. Join society.
Our society.
We're having we're having a very fitting evening meeting, but we always have evening meeting.
Yes, that is. Except for last time. Last time when we did it in the afternoon and it was all wrong.
That's true, the vibe was off.
But I will have to say, that was probably one of the best recordings we've ever done.
Oh, just like quality-wise, or?
Because, and now here's what I wanted to propose, and this will work mostly for like full-length novels. So what we did last time was we kind of picked a couple points about the book that we wanted to talk about, and instead of doing even overview of the story or summarizing it all, we just talked about these very specific points. And that worked well, I think, for Phantom of the Opera because that is such a famous story. And chances are that a wider number of people listening are familiar with it. So we didn't really talk too much about the story itself. But I think that format worked really well.
But yeah, I agree too. It's good to go into it with not like a script, but points to hit.
It was also much easier to edit because we were a little more focused.
Yeah, I feel like you either need to be focused, and that makes a good podcast, but if you're going to be unfocused, it has to be in a very particular way.
Yeah, it has to be entertaining.
I mean, I'm always entertained by us, but I understand that my view is biased.
It was just a very easy to edit, easy to listen to episode.
Yeah, it was good too because we had also talked about it a little bit beforehand and while we were reading. In particular, we had talked about how we had different translations.
Yes.
So it makes it easier to read if you have an idea of what you want to talk about, just because you can you can mark specific things in your brain.
Yeah, and I have my invisible notes.
Oh yeah, your pencil on black paper.
I do now have silver pens, so they're a little more visible. I don't take notes as I'm reading. I know you like do the post-its sometimes. But I usually wait till I'm done and then kind of write down broader ideas of what I thought about it.
Yeah, I typically try to do a mix of both because my problem is, as somebody with a pretty poor working memory, if I don't put post-its on like specific ideas or passages, they will leave my brain and I will just fumble around and very badly summarize it.
You're not going to be able to do that for the next one, and I'm not going to say what it is, but I think you and I we were both only able to procure audiobook versions.
Mm-hmm. Yes, which I was surprised because I feel like it's a decently well-known story, but it's well-known for an adaptation, not the original.
Yes. And I have some more things to add to that, but that is next episode, so we gotta not talk about that yet. So this episode.
Yes, this episode, we read a short story, a pretty short story. In the version I had, which was the only version, or one of two versions, I guess, took up about 14 pages. But so Ovando by Jamaica Kincaid. Now, Jamaica Kincaid as a person is pretty fascinating. I also love reading her. I have some experience because I read her in college. Have you ever heard of her?
No, I have not. I had not.
Jamaica Kincaid writes a little bit of everything. Novels, short stories, essays. She's written children's like picture books. She writes about gardening. She's a really big gardener. So she writes sort of all-rounder. But she has a very sort of direct way of writing that I found. It's not like I've I have not read everything she's ever written, so I don't want to make it sound like I'm an expert, but I've read some nonfiction and some short fiction by her,
Mhm.
and both have a similar quality. They're very beautiful to read, but they're also very sort of blunt in a way.
Yeah, I would agree, especially where this short story is concerned, because it's not subtle.
And it's not meant to be.
It's a metaphor, but it's like barely a metaphor.
Yeah, it's like one of those literal metaphors that we like to talk about in Gothic a lot.
Yeah, but also at the same time, because it is presented as a metaphorical representation, but at the same time, like it's the things she describes is very surreal, right? Like she's
Yeah,
talking about a person, but then the way she describes this person aren't actually like physically possible. So it's got this very surreal and almost like dreamlike quality to it.
yeah, it's very direct in it, but so the story is about colonialism.
Which
But
is extremely obvious right from the get-go.
yes, but the way she tells it is sort of there are two characters, people in this story. One of them is an indigenous to a place character, and another is the colonizing character, and that's Ovando. And so it's told in a very personal way because the concept has been humanized, but humanizing such a large, complex idea, like you said, it's surreal, it's dreamlike. It's also very much remind me sort of like of a fable or almost a mythology because the characters are literally larger than life. They encompass so much.
Like how countries have different characters to represent them. So you have an entire country or culture represented by this anthropomorphized.
Yeah.
It's a human character meant to represent an entire country or culture or region. I've never seen Hitalia, but I think that is kind of the idea behind that too.
I'm glad you brought that up because I was also thinking about that. That was such a time on deviantart.com.
That was a time to be at anime cons too, I have to say.
I was not at AnimyCons at the time, so I cannot speak to that. I was, however, on DeviantArt, and boy, the fan art was weird.
I mean, it is kind of weird because, again, the characters actually in the manga represent entire countries, and it's a, I guess, scaled down retelling of the Second World War.
All right.
And I know there's a lot of criticism for, like, trivializing battles.
You know what? That's great. That's super. That's exactly what we want to
So,
do.
yeah, so it's kind of interesting because you have this way of telling history in a way that makes it like more personable and like easier for readers to relate to if they're actually like following a human person. But at the same time, you have this character representing millions of people instead of really being able to show actual horror of these events. It's not shown in a way that was like sensitive to the fact that people actually died.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like it.
And then you have, cosplayers walking around cosplaying Axis characters, and it really softens the actual events.
Yeah, that's not what you want, especially with that war specifically.
Again, I've actually never seen or read it. This is just what I've gleaned from having been around it during the time that it was very popular.
Yes, and it was, if you were not on the internet at that time or at anime cons, Dear Society members, it was prolific. It was in every corner of the fandom space. Even if you weren't a part of the fandom, it would crawl its way into your, like, across your page, and you just couldn't get away from it.
Yeah, and I know there was a lot of criticism very specifically about like the way that the Normandy beach landings were shown in the manga. I would argue actually that this short story of Ovando kind of has the opposite effect. It doesn't trivialize the events. It puts it on a scale where the horrors are more personal.
Yes. Because, like, again, I think it goes back to because it's such a big concept, colonialism. And within the concept of colonialism, there are lots of other ideas that are connected to it. But giving them a human form,
It makes it less abstract.
yes, it makes it less abstract, which is ironic because the story is kind of abstract out of necessity.
Mhm.
So it's a very interesting dichotomy. But what I was going to say is because we're coming at this from the perspectives of white Americans. So Jamaica Kincaid is Antiguan American. So she was born in St. John's in Antigua and then immigrated to the United States when she was 16. Obviously, when she's writing about colonialism and these sorts of themes, she's writing from a place of having experienced and lived in a place where that was very prominent. We're not coming at it from that place, and I think
Antigua's in what
it's in the
it's an
Caribbean.
island. Yeah, it's in
Yeah.
the Caribbean, right?
She was born in St. John's, and she actually changed her name. So she was born under a different name. She changed it to Jamaica Kincaid after she started being published. Now, it didn't go into depth about her childhood, what I was reading, but her mother and her stepfather were both Antiguan. And like when she moved to the United States, she went by herself because what happened was, being in a colonized Caribbean island, the education system was very British, very UK.
Mm-hmm.
And so she was in school, she was doing really well in school, but then she got pulled out to work to support the family because her stepfather could no longer work. So, which is how she got sent to New York City to work as an au pair. But then, funny story about that. So, she was sent to New York City to work, and then she refused to send any money home and was cut off from her family for decades because she had a lot of baggage.
No.
Yeah, what I was trying to get at was like we're coming at this from a place of privilege. And this story, I think, because it's told from the point of view of the anthropomorphized
Yeah.
character of the colonized culture, like it puts us, privileged white folk, into these shoes. And I think, I don't know how to phrase what I'm trying to say here, that it puts us as the reader into an extremely uncomfortable position of like having to think about even just tiny portion of the things that the people who were colonized have to think about and deal with on a daily basis. I think that's an important thing to grapple with. Did that make sense? Because it's supposed to be uncomfortable, and also relating to both Ovando on the level of like obviously that's the white man, but then the story being told from the point of view of the colonized people. It's just again, it's a dichotomy, and it's a very short story, but because you have that dichotomy, it's extremely effective. And then the elements, the surreal sort of elements, the description of Ovando, and this is immediately first paragraph. Not a shred of flesh was left on his bones. He was a complete skeleton except for his brain, which remained and was growing smaller by the millennium.
Yeah, that's also, I think, your first clue that this is not a literal person.
Yeah, and he stank. Immediately I was struck by his innocence, for he had made himself a body from plates of steel, and it was stained with shades of red, blood in various stages of decay, and he thought I would not know the difference. He carried with him the following things: Bibles, cathedrals, museums, for he was already an established collector, libraries, banks really, in which he stored the contents of his diminishing brain, the contents of a drawing room. So a lot of the narratives of the narratives that colonizers make is that they're bringing civilization, that they've stumbled across these poor people and they're helping them by bringing all these things. But from this perspective, we're seeing Ovando, the colonizer, as we're pitying him.
He's quite
And we feel
pathetic.
sorry. Yeah, he's
Yeah.
pathetic. He's described as being innocent and ignorant and like not understanding his actions, not being fully capable of understanding them. Multiple times across the story, it's referenced that his brain is shrinking. The more he collects, sort of the less he knows.
Yeah, because it's about the acquisition of wealth and not actually the acquisition of knowledge or understanding.
Yeah, it's a very surface, shallow idea of wealth that Ovando is after. And that is really one of the great quests of humanity generally, right? Is the search for wisdom or deeper meaning. Why are we alive? And for Ovando, it's just he wants to conquer. And that's seen as it's shown as pathetic and pitiful and horrible. And really, I think the ignorance of Ovando is also what allows him to do those things. And it's referenced in the story as well. He's not thinking about it because he can't think about it. Because if he did, he would see his actions for what they are, which is hurtful and monstrous. Because, at the end of the day, it's about ignoring humanity. It's overlooking somebody else's humanity. Oh, this was another line that really struck me near the end. Ovando lived in the thickest part of the night, the deepest part of the night, the part of the night where all suffering dwells, including death, the part of the night in which the weight of the world is made visible and eternal terror is confirmed. In this night, Ovando's body was covered with sores. Sores, not wounds, for the hand that inflicts wounds may be an unjust hand, and injustice calls forth pity. He lay on a bed of broken glass bottles, not nails. The hand that inflicts wounds may be an unjust hand, and injustice calls forth pity. Because I don't even know what I'm trying to say about that, but it's a banger of a line.
Let's go back to the beginning for a minute, because I think that because this is told in a first person point of view. So you have the narrator who just is identified as I. So that is obviously representing the indigenous people of where Ovando has landed. And Ovando, I think it's also notable that his name is Nicolas de Ovando, which sounds like a Spanish name. The Spanish being, famously the conquistadors.
Yes.
In the the Caribbean and Central America. But the reaction of the narrator when Ovando first arrives isn't one of disgust or even that's not even a violent reaction. They actually invite him in, or they say, "I would have, but he was already inside." And there was a line that I thought was very interesting. It was, "Many people would have said this was my first big mistake. And I always say, how could it be a mistake to show sympathy, to show trust, to show affection to another human being on first meeting?"
Yes.
History did not have to go the way that it did.
No.
Now we're centuries removed from those first contact events.
It's also frustrating from the perspective of now there's so much that has to be undone that we are trying to do the work for, right? But that's still also everybody is hurt by the mentality. And I think this story also shows that. It's not just the character of the indigenous culture welcoming Ovando in. They're not the only person hurt in this story. It's also Ovando.
Mm-hmm.
And now, centuries later, we're still trying to sort of not take back what was done, because you can't do that, right? Trying to make amends in any way we can, or trying to sort of do the learning, to honor people as they should be and as they deserve to be.
There's also another part I found interesting, which was kind of in the middle, where it starts with, "From where I sit, the world looks flat. I look out to the horizon. The world ends in a sharp, flat, clear line where the seas and the sky are joined. I look out into my world and I accept it in its flatness. I am not tempted to transgress its boundaries." She's saying here basically is, because she also says the world is good. I accept the goodness that my world bears me. They're living in this environment that they're very familiar with, and they know how to survive in it, and they don't see any need to kind of expand beyond where they are. A lot of the driving force of discovery and learning is the desire to see what else there is. It's just an interesting contrast to me, these different perspectives where you have on one hand, we want to know what there is, we want to discover and learn, but at the same time, we have this other perspective of everything is fine as it is, and I don't see a reason to venture out to where things maybe aren't good.
Yeah, well, and that's also kind of touched upon. To the stranger's eye, my world is a paradise. To the stranger's eye, everything in my world appears as if it were made anew each night I sleep by gods in their heavenly chambers. It's talking about how, Ovando, from an outside perspective looking in, is oh, that's better. I come from England where it rains 350 days out of 365 days. And that's...
Oh, yeah. Well, the Caribbean is still the tropical paradise. And I don't think that either perspective is inherently good or bad. I think it's how you go about it, how you interact with people, how you accomplish whatever goals you happen to have, whether it's in a constructive way or in a destructive way.
Oh yeah, for sure. And in that little section, my world is flat. I accept this. Its borders are finite. I accept this. The flatness ain't to me. The concept of finite versus infinite, that's such a weird infinite. You don't say finite.
That's the English language,
Infinite.
I guess, just
Yeah.
do its thing.
That really tripped me up for a second. But I'm going to make a bit of a silly analogy here.
Okay.
Because for me, now in my ripe old age, I've come to appreciate a standalone or like a mini series, a duology, so much more than like something without an ending. Like, take for example, any procedural crime drama, like NCIS. NCIS is very good for a few seasons, and then it just keeps going and going and going and going, and it gets worse and worse and worse and worse. And it's still going. It's somehow still going.
Here's the problem, I think, with when you're talking about television shows, dramas. Yeah, they can technically like go on forever, but there is a point where you have to kind of just figure it's getting repetitive, right?
Yeah, or, and this is also what's happened with SAIS, you take out all the original parts, you take out all the initial things that people liked and that made it unique and good, like the characters, and one by one they all get picked off and leave the show, and new characters have to be brought in, and then at a certain point it's just a new show with the same name, like new characters, new scenarios.
Hold that thought.
Okay.
Hold that thought. My second point about the TV analogy is that a lot of times shows will start off with a very specific premise, and the longer they go on, the further they get away from that premise until like it doesn't even resemble what we started with anymore. But the new characters. So I saw a post, and this was a few weeks ago, and it was like, having been at your job for years and all your coworkers have quit and you're the only one left. It's like when you're on season 10 of a TV show and you're the only person left of the original cast and nobody is watching and nobody cares.
Oh my god, that's so funny. That's so true though.
So yeah, I relate to that. Like, and it's not good anymore.
No, it's not good anymore. It's just capitalism, just making money. And I mean, that's the thing it comes back to. I mean, the television thing is kind of a silly analogy, but like, and I think this is true for just money in general, right? In our age of billionaires and quadruple billionaires, trillionaires, whatever, the amount of money that some people have being so outrageous that it's actually impossible to earn through work, right? Like, you have to manipulate things, you have to exploit the labor of other people in order to amass that many zeros. There's no benefit to infinite wealth. Like, at a certain point, there's just not. So I think, and even like when you think creatively, sometimes having constraints, borders, finite parameters draws out more creativity.
There's a comfort in the world only being so big. When you're not, I guess this is also when you're not exposed to the 24/7 news cycle of all the terrible news in every corner of the world.
Well, yeah, that's another thing. Finite news is, you know what I mean? Like, it's less filler. You just get the important bits, theoretically, and it's less...
But I can also see how, to a point, you don't want to stagnate. And the narrator in this story obviously is talking about that's not a problem for them. They're happy where they are, which is, you'll find, like, I don't think it's, again, I just kind of think it's a neutral, like, limits are good in some aspects, and then striving for more is also good in some aspects.
Yeah, well, and I think, like, exploring, I mean, in the case of the story where they're talking about the horizon and, the borders, like, going beyond the horizon to learn is not a bad thing. To explore is not a bad thing. It's when you start going beyond to make it your own where the problems come up. Do you have anything more to say on that?
On that note, I think we've covered that idea well enough.
Okay. But yeah, so Jamaica Kincaid as a writer, because I think I mentioned this earlier, but she writes across multiple different sort of forms and genres, nonfiction, fiction. She's written for The New Yorker, a couple different magazines, books, essays, garden articles. And I mean, aside from the garden articles, although I'm assuming I can't say for certain because I've never read them, a lot of her major themes are the themes from this story. In terms of colonialism, the sort of European imposition on the Caribbean islands and culture. She's been criticized, and I find this very fascinating. She's been criticized for being too angry with her writing and for prioritizing sort of the emotion and the social and political themes and ideas over quote unquote good craft. And I was reading about that and I was like, but isn't that the point of art to a certain extent? Is the emotion and the truth of whatever it is you're trying to express?
Yeah, I mean, I've only read this, and maybe some of her other writings are more angry, but I found this to be very, I mean, it's not happy,
Mm-hmm.
but I found it to be very tempered. You know,
Mm.
it's portraying the, I don't know what the word I want is.
Well, I think we touched on this earlier, but it's like pitying Ovando and
Yeah.
seeing him as a pitiful figure.
And I don't think there's a way to write about this topic truthfully and not have it be at least a little.
No, I mean,
I
I
again, I
agree.
don't know what the word I want. It's like I don't think you can be honest about this topic and, you know, paint it as a nice time.
Oh, no. One of her most famous sort of semi autobiographical, like creative nonfiction essay. And I mean, a lot of her work is semi autobiographical. Like she'll take details from her own life a lot of the times to tell the stories she wants to tell. It's called A Small Place, and I read it in college. And she uses a similar sort of device in that story where she puts the reader into, well, I guess it's not a story, it's an essay. She puts the reader into the essay, but it's told in second person. So the reader is you. And basically, the premise, the way the essay is written, is you are a tourist in this place. And it talks about similar themes to this. Again, colonialism and the effects of that and the long reaching effects in that. And that one, I wouldn't even classify that as angry. But again, it puts the reader in a really uncomfortable position of being responsible for the things that are being described, for, the ways that colonialism has hurt the island of Antigua. Generally, A Small Place is actually pretty easy to find online. I do recommend it as an essay to read. I think it's really interesting. And Jamaica Kincaid, just the way that she writes, I think it has that quality of the language being quote unquote simple. Like it's not like she's using big thesaurus. It's not like she's using big thesaurus words, right? Like she uses pretty simple syntax, pretty simple sentence structure, but she's able to pack so much emotion and so many ideas that it's captivating. It's enchanting in a way.
Yeah, well, it's like when you were saying before about how short the story is, but there's a lot in it. And there's never a point where and maybe it is because it is a shorter piece, so it's really focused, but it doesn't draw too long on anything. There's never a point where it's dull or boring. Language she uses, yeah, it's not overly complicated, but that keeps it engaging. And it's not
Yeah,
too
and
simple either.
no, no, it definitely isn't. Like it's exactly what it needs to be. And I think that is sort of the beauty of short form. Ovando as a full length, like a novel, even a novella, any longer, it would not have worked. But because it's so short, you can almost pack more into it, or you can get weirder with it in a sense. Like short stories are sort of the place where you can take these big ideas that aren't sustainable, but are maybe interesting or thought provoking or whatever it is you're looking for. And in short form, like you can get a lot of meaning out of it just by playing with the expectations, right? Like it's not like this follows your expectation of a story necessarily. So having the short medium allows that without overstaying its welcome.
I would say too, this is because we like to talk more about like characters and plot, like actually story mechanics. But because this is so obvious, it makes it a little bit harder. And there is a lot of like I think there's a good balance between things being very obvious and also things that you can see like, oh, you know, she's talking about this very specific instance or this very specific idea. So it's got a good balance, but I just because it is a more like straightforward story, I don't have anything else to say about it.
I don't
But
either, but honestly, like
it's
like
like I read it, I understood it.
yeah, and I think we had a good discussion about it because it's like you said, we like to talk about like characters and literary devices and stuff. But this the whole story is sort of a device to get
Yeah.
you to think about these concepts. That again, I think lends to the sort of feeling of it being a mythology or a fable. Because like fables are used to impart wisdom,
Hmm.
and this does have a moral lesson. Very granted, a very large scale moral lesson. Kind of hard to enact it on an individual level, but it's important. It's an important lesson nonetheless.
But actually, it was a good read, though. Actually, not an easy topic to think about, but it was a good read.
good read and not an easy topic to think about, but an important one. So that's our lesson for you today, dear listener, is to put the work in, read things that maybe make you a little bit uncomfortable, do the work.
Read things from different perspectives.
Yes.
Expand your horizons. Go beyond the finite borders of your understanding.
Yeah, that's true. Go beyond. Don't take anything. Just look. It's like just look. You're visiting.
You take the knowledge and you add it to your wisdom.
Yeah. What is it they say when you go into a national park? Is to leave no trace.
But I mean, they're talking about garbage.
I mean, isn't that colonialism? Just leaving your garbage everywhere.
I mean, that goes back to thinking that one of those parties has nothing to contribute.
Good point. Good point.
You
I
have
just
to
wanted
consider both parties have something to contribute, but they need to contribute. This needs to be an equal relationship.
a conversation, not a diatribe, not a monologue, whatever.
Equivalent exchange.
Yeah. All right. Well, I guess we can call that a wrap. Jamaica Kincaid is still alive and she's still publishing. Her last book was, I think, 2013, but she still sometimes publishes stories and essays and stuff in places like the New York Times. We don't often talk about living authors.
No, actually, we almost never talk about living authors. Say, even like some of the authors from the stories we read that were published in the 80s, the authors aren't even alive anymore.
Oh yeah, like
Angela Carter.
Yeah, Angela Carter, Catherine Dunn. But yeah, cool lady. Definitely check her out. This story is kind of hard to find unless you can find The New Gothic, which is a collection of contemporary Gothic fiction that was put out in, I believe, the early 2000s. Sorry, 1991. Never mind.
Oh,
The early 1990s.
Wow. Okay, but it was originally published in like 88, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was originally published in a magazine, I think. So this story in particular might be a little hard to find, but Jamaica Kincaid, generally, you can find a lot of her writing and her essays and things just searching online, and I highly recommend giving her a read. Or, you know what? Check out your local library. Just a thought. And okay, so we will bid you all adieu, Haunted Heart Society members, and we will be back in 2 weeks to discuss a novel.
That's right.
I don't know. I haven't started it yet, so I don't know how to allude to it.
Well, I finished it because I was really nervous about finishing it on time. The audiobook actually wasn't that long. It was less than 7 hours.
That's not bad.
So I got through it pretty quickly. Here's the problem I have with the audiobook though, because to do the cipher for the next novel, I've been pulling a quote from the book that we read. And in that quote, there is some key letter that you need to use to solve the cipher. I can't do that with an audiobook because I can't look at the words and see if there's some sort of key letter that I can try to pick and make obvious that that's the letter that you need to use. It was a little easier in the older books because they tend to do things like capitalize letters just because they thought they were important.
Yep.
Well, I guess here's a hint. Mid-century writing doesn't do that as much.
What about, did you, on like Goodreads and stuff, people will pull out quotes from books?
Yes, I did look, and there were not very many, and none of them were particularly good.
Nah.
So, I don't know what I'm going to do for this cipher. I'm going to have to think of it.
Maybe you could just do the title. I guess that wouldn't really work. That would defeat the purpose of the cipher.
Yeah, I don't know.
Maybe just the synopsis. But yeah, so, well, we will have more details for you next time. So stay tuned for that.
We will have the complete answer next time.
All right. In the meantime, don't forget, if you haven't already, to give us a like, subscribe, follow us, whatever is applicable on the platform you're on. And we will talk to you next time. Goodbye.
All right.